Is the persistence of widening income disparities something that we should worry about? And if so, why?
This is a very interesting question, Cristina, and I think a very relevant one today. I get a little worried sometimes when I hear some colleagues in the academic community and sometimes in policy circles, people express a certain degree of satisfaction with the fact that the developing countries now are growing, at twice, if not higher, rates than the advanced economies. The idea is essentially that we are already in a process of convergence. That all we need to do is wait a while, before the developing countries catch up, with the standards of living that you see in the more advanced economies. There is a problem with this argument, and let me give you an example to illustrate. If you take the latest data from the World Bank on income per capita, and you look at the high-income countries, the average income per capita of the high-income countries in 2012 was a little more than $41,000, right, per person. Then look at the low-income countries. It is a little less than $600 per capita, right? Now, assume that the high-income countries grow at the rate of 1.8% per year for the next many, many years, which is actually the rate that they have shown over the last 20 years, right? So just extrapolate that. And then assume that the low-income countries grow at 4% per year, which is again, something that is consistent with what is happening today. And then ask yourself, how long does it take before the poor group converges to the high group? Well, it doesn't happen. It happens well into the 22nd century, right? I mean, in fact, what happens with the gap is that it widens for many, many decades to come, because if you apply 1.8% to $40,000, that's still a number that is much bigger than applying 4% to $600, right? So before it converges, it widens. It becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars, over the longer term before it begins to widen. And so essentially, we're talking about convergence, but it's a very long, very distant phenomena, right? Now, what's the problem with the gap, to answer your question, right? Well, here I will paraphrase a professor at Harvard University by the name of David Landis, who once said that the problem with the gap is that the bigger the gap, the more difficult it is to make the jump, right? It's kind of a metaphor from sports, I guess, right? And the problem with the widening gap is that if people in the country, let's say a sub-Saharan country, feel that convergence is not going to happen within my lifetime, right? I am a father, I have children, I am a poor farmer in sub-Saharan Africa, but I do have access to a mobile phone and a television, and I know how everybody else in the world lives, right? If I feel that convergence, is not going to happen in my lifetime, then other kinds of incentives begin to take place. And then I want to make another kind of jump, which is basically to leave my country and go and try to get work in Spain or in Sweden or in other parts of the world, which is actually, as you know, what's happening. It is, massive illegal or legal migration is a serious problem in many parts of the world. So this is one issue, no? The other problem with the widening gap is that, this is more a kind of a political economy sort of issue, is that it creates a very difficult context for the implementation of sound economic policies. It is difficult to do good economic policy when your population is essentially dissatisfied or otherwise thinks that there is no future, there is no hope. That is why you see populism in many parts of the developing world. Some demagogue comes into power and he promises everything, if only we do this or that, as opposed to what the few successful countries of upward mobility, the Koreas and the Singapores and so on, show, which is basically that it takes tough work, it takes consistency, it takes coherence, it takes patience, you have to invest, you have to educate your population. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period of several decades. And so the problem with a widening gap is that, you have this kind of tension, between between the desire, for quick gains, which then may feed into populist tendencies, and the need for patience and for discipline, which is really the secret of success. No, I think that this is one of the problems that I see as being very much at the center of this discussion of the gap.
How is the process of globalization, and how are new technologies contributing or not to this widening gap?
I think that this is a very interesting issue, Cristina. My own sense is that the new technologies, internet, mobile telephones, the personal computer, are making information easily accessible, to people who previously, had no access to this information. Poor people, farmers, sometimes people who are illiterate. They don't know how to read and write, but they have an iPhone. I've seen this in many parts of the world. And this access to information, provides citizens in the developing world a much closer look as to how the rest of the world lives, especially the rich part of the world, the advanced economies. In a way that certainly was not the case, leading up to the middle part of the last century. And this may, in some sense, be creating unreasonable expectations of catch-up on the part of these populations, who then may exert pressure on their politicians, to basically accelerate the process of economic development at a time when, in fact, this can't always be done. Hence, there's a resurgence of populism in some parts of the world.